This is the story of a king consumed by jealousy and a young man chosen by God. As David rises, Saul's heart turns against him, leading to betrayal, pursuit, and deadly conflict. But David must decide. Will he seek revenge against the king who wants him dead, or trust God's plan and wait for his appointed time?
David had become a hero throughout Israel. After defeating Goliath, the people celebrated his courage wherever he went. But one song changed everything. As the women sang, they praised Saul for his victories, but they gave David even greater honor. The king heard their words, and jealousy entered his heart. From that day forward, Saul began watching David with suspicion. David remained humble and continued serving the king faithfully, unaware that Saul's admiration had turned into fear. The young shepherd had defeated a giant, but now he faced a far more dangerous enemy, the jealous king sitting beside him.
David continued serving King Saul. He remained faithful and humble. Each time the young shepherd played his harp, peace filled the palace. But Saul's heart was changing. Jealousy had become fear, and fear soon became violence. While David played before the king, Saul suddenly gripped his spear and hurled it across the room. David moved just in time, and the spear struck the wall behind him. Though Saul had tried to kill him, David chose not to fight back. The king's anger had begun, but David's faith would be tested like never before.
Saul could not understand why David had survived. Instead of celebrating the young warrior's loyalty, the king became even more afraid. David continued serving faithfully, but danger now surrounded him. Every day Saul watched him closely, waiting for an opportunity to remove him. Yet God remained with David, and everything he did prospered. The people of Israel admired him, and this only increased Saul's jealousy.
Rejoice! For the Lord has brought us victory.
I built this empire from the dust. But who will stand to defend it when I am gone?
The shepherd who had defeated Goliath now found himself trapped inside the palace.
Not, O memories of old. Bring me the harpist.
A storm was approaching, and David's journey was only beginning.
Saul's jealousy continued to grow stronger every day. Instead of confronting David directly, the king decided to set a trap. Saul hoped that David would fall in battle against Israel's enemies.
Fight for the glory of the empire!
But David remained courageous and faithful, leading the king's soldiers with wisdom and strength. Everywhere he went, success followed him. The people admired him, and Saul became even more afraid.
My power is slipping away. Show yourself, David!
What Saul meant for harm, God used to prepare David for an even greater purpose. The battle for the throne had already begun.
David has slain his 10,000s. And what is left for me but the kingdom? The battle is far from over.
But David still refused to turn against his king.
David had risked his life for Israel, but danger was now closer than ever. King Saul's jealousy had grown into hatred, and the palace had become a place of fear. Yet even in the middle of the growing darkness, David was not alone.
I will not lose my kingdom.
Jonathan, Saul's own son, remained loyal to his friend.
He saw David's faithfulness and courage and knew that God was with him. While Saul planned in secret, Jonathan chose friendship over fear.
You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next unto thee. Whatever your soul desires, I will even do it. No other way to settle this, brother. The council awaits our decision now. You must reconsider before it is too late.
I will do what honor demands of me.
The battle was no longer between a shepherd and a giant.
I love you as my own soul.
The Lord is between us.
We are friends forever.
David must die. Yet my own son loves him as a brother. Jonathan's heart is bound to him. In you, O Lord, I place my trust.
Now it was
Guide my
between a
steps
faithful
on this
servant
unknown
and a
path.
jealous king.
David, kill him tonight.
David's life was now in terrible danger. King Saul ordered his servants to watch David's house and kill him by morning. But Michal, Saul's own daughter, loved David and could not allow such a thing to happen. Under the cover of darkness, she warned him to flee immediately.
Tonight. If you do not, tomorrow you will be a dead man. My father's men are coming. They are on their way here now. Escape while you still can.
David climbed down from the window
I must go.
and
Micah was
disappeared
right.
into the night.
The darkness is my only cover.
Behind him, Michal placed an object beneath a blanket to make it appear that David was still resting inside the house.
Something is not right here. This is a dummy! He is gone! Find him! Gone!
David has escaped.
Find him! Bring him before me!
By sunrise, the shepherd had become a fugitive, and a long journey had begun.
David had escaped from the palace, but he had nowhere to go. The young shepherd who once played music for the king now wandered through the wilderness alone. Yet even in the darkness, God remained beside him. David eventually reached the prophet Samuel, hoping to find wisdom and safety.
Saul has sought my life. I have fled to you.
Meanwhile, Saul's anger continued to grow stronger. Soldiers searched the land, determined to find the man they once called a hero. David had lost his home, but he had not lost his faith. A new chapter of his life had begun.
Impossible.
Knew that Saul's anger had become deadly. Even so, he hoped that his father might change his mind. When Jonathan spoke to the king, Saul exploded with rage. David could no longer remain in the palace. So Jonathan created a secret plan. He would shoot arrows into a nearby field as a signal to warn his friend. As David watched from his hiding place, Jonathan released the arrows. Their friendship had been tested, but their loyalty remained unbroken. David was now truly alone.
May the Lord be with him.
Yet God was preparing him for something far greater. He knew that Saul's anger had become deadly. Even so, he hoped that his father might change his mind. When Jonathan spoke to the king, Saul exploded with rage. David could no longer remain in the palace. So Jonathan created a secret plan. He would shoot arrows into a nearby field as a signal to warn his friend. As David watched from his hiding place, Jonathan released the arrows. Their friendship had been tested, but their loyalty remained unbroken. David was now truly alone.
May the Lord be with him.
Yet God was preparing him for something far greater.
Journey through the wilderness had only just begun. Hungry, exhausted, and alone, he arrived at the city of Nob, where the priest Ahimelech welcomed him with caution.
Peace be
David
with you.
asked for food, but there was
I
no
have traveled for
ordinary
days
bread to
reach
give
you,
him.
Ahimelech.
Instead, the priest offered the holy bread that had been placed before the Lord. David accepted the gift with gratitude, unaware that dangerous eyes were watching nearby.
My king, we
The
searched
young
everywhere.
shepherd
We
had
could not find
escaped
David
the
anywhere.
king.
Find him! Bring David to me!
But Saul's shadow continued to follow him wherever he went.
Troubles were far from over. Desperate to escape Saul's pursuit, he fled to the city of Gath, the home of the Philistines. But the people immediately recognized him. This was the warrior who had defeated Goliath.
Yes, word says he killed our giant.
Fear gripped David's heart as the servants of King Achish whispered among themselves. Realizing that his life was in danger once again, David made an unexpected decision. He pretended to be insane before the king.
The gate! Scratch the letters! Do I lack madmen that you bring this fellow? Why does this man attempt to play the madman? Am I in need of madmen that you bring this fellow?
The mighty warrior, who had once stood bravely against giants, now fought a very different battle for survival.
David was hiding in the cave of Adullam. King Saul was becoming consumed by suspicion. Saul sat beneath a great tree, surrounded by his servants, and accused them of betraying him. He believed everyone was secretly helping David escape. Then Doeg the Edomite spoke. He told Saul that he had seen David at Nob, speaking with Ahimelech the priest. The priest had given David food and even a sword. To Saul, this was proof of conspiracy. Ahimelech was brought before the king and tried to explain that he knew nothing of Saul's hatred toward David. He believed David was still one of the king's most faithful servants, but Saul refused to listen. In his anger, the king commanded his guards to kill the priests of the Lord. They refused. Then Saul turned to Doeg, and Doeg obeyed. That day, the priests of Nob were slaughtered, and the peaceful city was struck by tragedy because of Saul's jealousy and rage. Only one priest escaped. His name was Abiathar. He fled to David and told him what had happened. David was devastated. He realized that his own escape had been connected to the terrible destruction of Nob. But David did not abandon Abiathar. Instead, he promised to protect him. While Saul was destroying everything around him, David was learning what it truly meant to be.
David was still hiding from Saul when news reached him that the Philistines were attacking the city of Keilah. They were raiding the fields and stealing the harvest, leaving the people terrified and helpless. David's men were afraid. They were already fugitives. Saul was hunting them, and now David was considering walking directly into another battle. But David sought the Lord, and the answer was clear. He was told to go and rescue Keilah. So David and his men left the safety of the wilderness and marched toward the city. When they arrived, they attacked the Philistines and defeated them. The enemy fled, and the people of Keilah were saved. But David's victory came with a cost. Saul soon heard that David had entered Keilah. The king thought he had finally found the perfect opportunity. He gathered his army and prepared to surround the city. David learned of Saul's plan and asked the Lord whether the people of Keilah would hand him over. The answer was yes. So David made another difficult decision. He left the city. The man who had just saved Keilah could not remain there. Once again, David disappeared into the wilderness, trusting that God would guide him, even when every place he went seemed to become a trap.
The wilderness will be our sheep.
He had rescued Keilah, and for a moment, it seemed that he and his men had finally found a place where they could rest, but their peace would not last. Saul soon heard that David was inside the city.
He believed God had delivered David into his hands, so he gathered his army and prepared to surround Keilah. David heard about Saul's plan and immediately sought the Lord. He asked, "Will Saul really come here?" The answer was yes. Then David asked another question. Will the people of Keilah hand me over to Saul? And again, the answer was yes. David had just risked his life to save these people from the Philistines. Yet now, because they feared Saul, they might betray the very man who had rescued them. David could have stayed and fought, but instead, he chose to leave. He gathered his men and disappeared into the wilderness before Saul could reach the city. Once again, David had no palace, no army, and no permanent home. But he had something Saul could never take from him. David still had God's protection. And while Saul searched for him across the land, David continued moving from place to place, waiting for the day when God's promise would finally be fulfilled.
David was still hiding in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul's soldiers were searching everywhere for him, and every passing day brought the possibility of capture. David had already lost his home. He had been separated from his family, forced away from the palace, and betrayed by people he had once rescued. But then, in the middle of his darkest season, someone came looking for him. It was Jonathan. Saul's own son had secretly traveled into the wilderness to find David. When he finally reached him, Jonathan did not tell David to fight Saul. He did not tell him to run farther. Instead, he strengthened his friend's faith. Jonathan reminded David that God had chosen him for something greater. He told him not to be afraid because Saul would not succeed. The two friends stood together in the wilderness, knowing they might never have another moment like this. Jonathan understood that David would one day become king. And even though David was still hiding in caves, and Saul was still chasing him, God's promise had not changed. Before they separated, Jonathan and David renewed their covenant of friendship. Then Jonathan returned home, and David remained in the wilderness, waiting for the day when God would fulfill his promise.
After Jonathan returned home, David continued hiding in the wilderness. But Saul's pursuit did not stop. One day, Saul received word that David was hiding near En-Gedi. He gathered 3,000 chosen soldiers and marched into the wilderness, determined to capture him. David and his men were hiding deep inside a large cave. Then, something unexpected happened. Saul entered the very cave where David was hiding. He was completely unaware that his greatest enemy was only a short distance away. David's men whispered that this was the moment God had given him. Saul was alone, vulnerable, and within David's reach. David quietly moved toward the king. He could have ended years of fear and persecution with one strike. He could have taken the throne by force. But David stopped. Instead of killing Saul, he secretly cut off a small piece from the edge of the king's robe. Then, David's conscience troubled him. He turned to his men and refused to allow them to harm Saul. David understood something that his followers did not. The throne belonged to God. David would not become king by murdering the man God had already placed on the throne. So Saul walked out of the cave alive. And David remained hidden in the darkness, knowing that he had just passed one of the greatest tests of his life.
Saul left the cave. David stepped out behind him. He called out, "My lord the king." Saul turned around. David bowed deeply and held up the piece of crimson fabric he had cut from Saul's robe. He told the king that he had been close enough to kill him, but he refused. David asked Saul why he continued hunting him when he had done nothing wrong. He reminded Saul that he could have taken his life inside the cave, yet he chose mercy. David's voice carried both respect and pain. He had never wanted Saul's throne through violence. He had never wanted to become Saul's enemy. He only wanted to live. Saul listened, and for perhaps the first time, the king saw the truth clearly. David had spared his life. Saul began to weep. He admitted that David was more righteous than he was, and he recognized something he had been desperately trying to deny. David would one day become king. Saul asked David to promise that he would not destroy Saul's family when that day came. David gave his word. For a brief moment, the hunter and the hunted stood together without hatred between them. Then Saul returned home, and David returned to the wilderness. Their conflict had paused, but their story was not finished.
The day David had been waiting for finally came, but not in the way he imagined. The Philistines gathered their armies against Israel at Mount Gilboa. Saul led his soldiers into battle, and the fighting became fierce. Israel's army began to fall. Then Saul watched in horror as his sons were struck down. Jonathan was dead. 2 of Saul's other sons had also fallen. And now the battle was closing in around the king himself. Saul was wounded and knew that his end was near. The man who had once ruled Israel with strength was now lying broken on the battlefield, surrounded by the consequences of a life filled with fear, jealousy, and disobedience. Saul died there on Mount Gilboa. When David later heard the news, he did not celebrate. He tore his clothes and mourned. He wept for Saul, and he wept for Jonathan. David had spent years running from Saul. Saul had hunted him, betrayed him, and tried to kill him. Yet David refused to rejoice over his death. Instead, he ordered Israel to remember Saul and Jonathan with honor. David had finally lost the man who had stood between him and the throne, but he had also lost his closest friend. Jonathan was gone. Saul was gone. The wilderness years were coming to an end, and David was about to step into the destiny God had promised him long ago. The hunted man was about to become king.